This is Jim Williams with the Hurricane City Tropical Update for September 8th, 6 p.m. Hurricane Katia is passing northwest of Bermuda, and this turn to the northeast is expected shortly, and the system should pass northeast south of the Canadian Maritimes and head out into the open Atlantic. So now our focus is on Tropical Storm Maria, as what's up on the screen right now, and Tropical Storm Nate down in the Bay of Campeche. Let's start with Maria. Here's the official forecast going out 5 days from now. The position puts it right near Great Abaco Island, maybe just east of Great Abaco Island, going into Tuesday afternoon. Now, this would have huge ramifications if this were to be a little bit further south and there was any kind of watches or warnings out for South Florida. You have a Monday Night Football game coming out on the 12th, and this would be the 13th in this position. So if it was going to hit South Florida, which it does not look like that's going to happen, but if the models shift any further south and west, and this was to occur, there would be an interesting scenario for Monday Night Football. Do they go on with the game, even though there would be potentially a hurricane watch or warning if this were to regain hurricane status or become a hurricane at this position? This is forecasting for strong tropical storms, 70-mile-per-hour winds at this position, so we're going to keep an eye on this. The ridge is pretty strong out there, and there's been several models that indicated this could get into the greater Antilles and tangle with the southeastern Bahamas, so we're going to have to watch this closely. Let's go ahead and put it in motion one more time. Current feature is Dominica, by the way, at Hurricane City, as this should pass through over the weekend, and then it starts moving more northwest as it gets near the Bahama Island chain. So we'll see how this all plays out over the next several days with the models and everything else, but it is an interesting scenario. All right, let's go ahead and look at our other system over here, Nate, in the southern Gulf of Mexico, and let's bring up the map on this. And the official forecast calls for this to move basically north and then start heading off to the west. Here you go. We're going into the 10th, and then the 11th. It's still moving north. People are going to get a little nervous up in here, but around the 12th, Monday, and then going into Tuesday, the system begins to make a turn more toward the west-northwest. Now, you got to kind of hope that this does get up into Texas, because they do need the rain up there. And this is calling for it to be a Category 1 at this point, although it could be a lot stronger than that because there's a lot of heat content out there in the Gulf of Mexico to work with. I know there's some dry air and other things, but we're going to talk about the future track and potential of this coming up on some maps I have to show. Actually, let me show you one of them right now. And this is the best performing model on Nate. And this is the TVCA model. It's only been off by about 21 miles at 24 hours on average. And this model is predicting it's going to go northwest and then west into near Tampico. So we'll be watching for that. That is the best performer so far on Tropical Storm Nate. But it's a little bit early in the game with Nate, and the models are still working out their differences. And it's early to be telling what the best performing model is on Nate because it's just too early. But we got to watch this closely. All right, here's the visible of Nate, and you can see the system has a pretty decent circulation. Another large system, again, when you have lower pressures in the basin, you're going to get larger systems. It's a pretty large wind field, so once this gets up here, even if it does not hit Texas, it may bring some much-needed rain in at least the southern part of the state if the forecast track verifies. But there it is. It's wrapping up. The center is probably on the northeastern side of this circulation here. Not real well organized, but close to becoming a hurricane, though. And here's the floater on Maria. You can see the low-level circulation, and then it starts to get obscured a little bit because we're losing our daylight out here. But let's, the center is right in here somewhere, and there's, a bunch of thunderstorms to the north of the center, but not a whole lot behind it. There's some dry air being wrapped in, and it's moving so fast that the center is having trouble consolidating. It's moving around 23 miles an hour or something. It's really flying out here because of a very strong ridge of high pressure to the north. The system is flying, and it's really having trouble organizing. Again, let's put it in motion. You can see the exposed low-level circulation there on the visible shots, and then it begins to tuck a little bit. Hurricane hunters were out there. They really couldn't close the system off, so we may have a depression at 11 p.m. We'll have to see how the Hurricane Center classifies this. But right now, there's only tropical storm watches out for the northern Leeward Islands. All right, remember I showed you this image yesterday. This was the best performer on Maria. Whoops, I wanted to zoom in on that. This was the best performer on Maria, the BAM shallow model. And today, the best performing model on Maria is the AP Aviation Ensemble number 14 model, and that takes it similar to this and then turns it north in here and then starts to waver around up in here, and that's where it stops. So the best performer AP14 Aviation Ensemble model, and that's only off by about 45.8 miles at 72 hours. So that's been the best performer so far in Maria, and that takes it up pretty much paralleling the National Hurricane Center forecast track. But we got to watch that weaker system going a little bit further south, like the Bam Shallow was showing yesterday. Right now, here are the models. Here is the Canadian model. Canadian's been all over the place on both of these systems, but the Canadian model wants to take Nate into Mexico, north of Tampico, and it takes Maria out here very close to Great Abaco Island and then starts turning it north-northeast and paralleling the Atlantic coastline and going probably a future track out to sea. But that's the Canadian model, and this is going out 144 hours, 5 days from now. And here is the GFS model. Now, the GFS has really shoved Maria way further to the west than it was on earlier runs. Earlier, it had it up near Bermuda. Now it's coming much closer to the Bahama Island trend. So you look for trends in models, and the models right now are leaning more west on Maria and a little bit more north on Nate. Now, here it is with Nate, and this is going out 144 hours as well. And it shows Hurricane Nate pretty powerful here in the Gulf of Mexico, well south of Louisiana. Still deciding which way it's going to go. But notice there's a little ridging up in here and north of Nate, and that may eventually shove it to the west. We'll have to see about that. But the GFS is kind of just hanging it up down there. And, of course, the GFS has it very close to Great Abaco and then turning off to the northeast. Here is the NOGAPS. And the NOGAPS already has Nate inland in Mexico. And it has Maria, again, very close to the Bahamas, and then makes the north turn between Bermuda and the United States. So these would all be good courses, and neither one of these would affect the United States if the NOGAPS and the Canadian verify. So we'll have to see about these models. Now, what does the Euro say? The Euro's, again, one of the very best, if not the best, global model out there. And this takes Nate and shoves it into Mexico right near Tampico. And this is going out about 4 days. Actually, let me look at this. This is going out to Sunday. And this would be on Sunday, September 11th, going into Mexico. And you notice how Maria here is north of Puerto Rico. Let's go next frame. And we're looking at Wednesday, September 14th. Nate is already inland, and Maria is now over here southeast of Andros Island, just north of eastern Cuba. And then let's go out even further. Then the turn takes place. Notice how Maria begins to make that turn, and it's up in here somewhere between Bermuda and the United States. And that's on September 17th, so late next week. So this is a little bit slower, the European model, than the other models on Maria. It slows it down quite a bit. All right, here's the GFDL on Maria, and this has it as a Category 3 hurricane right slicing through Andros Island. And if that were to verify, that would be September 13th, by the way, which would be Monday. So we have the Monday Night Football game coming up here in South Florida between the Dolphins and the Patriots. It'd be interesting to see how that all played out if this were to verify. But again, it's early yet. A lot of things can change with these models, but this is just one run of the GFDL, and it has shifted significantly to the west from previous runs. And here's the GFDL on, this is the HWRF on Maria, and it has Maria near Long Island, Bahamas, heading generally towards Andros Island, and this also has it as a potential major hurricane at this point. So both the tropical models have this going through the Bahamas, heading in the general direction of South Florida before a turn would take place, if that turn does take place on the tropical models. Now, what does it do with Nate? Here's the GFDL on Nate. GFDL takes this into Tampico, Mexico as a major hurricane, and that would be happening on, this would be going out to 90 hours from now, and that would be September 12th, which would be on Monday. And then here's what the HWRF is showing with Nate. And the HWRF shows it going north towards Louisiana. And this is a Category 1 hurricane in southeast Louisiana, heading towards Mississippi and Alabama, moving off to the north-northeast. So there's a huge difference in these two models on Nate between the HWRF and the GFDL. We're going to be watching this closely to see how this plays out. All right, here are all the models on Maria. Again, very tightly clustered. showing a recurvature in the Bahamas, but getting pretty close to Florida, or the Northwest Bahamas anyway, before the turn takes place. Now, of course, the UK Met and the GFDL continuing on the west-northwest track towards South Florida. And here are the model consensus, all the models together using the HERTRACK program on Nate. They all take it north and then bend it back to the southwest towards Mexico. So and there's the one model out there. That's the H-Wharf taking it into Louisiana and Mississippi. So we're going to be watching this closely. The GFS is the model I'm interested in because it had it into Mexico yesterday. Today it wants to take it north. We'll see what tomorrow brings. All right, one more thing. Let's look at the water vapor imagery and see what the call should be on these systems. And let's go ahead and stop it and show you our last image. And what's happening here, when you have a big low like this, we have a big trough on the East Coast, and usually there's a high behind it and a high out here in the Atlantic, and that's exactly the setup right now. And this high looks like it's moving to the southeast, and the high pressure in Mexico is also going to shift to the east, and this is going to force Nate here into Mexico. That's the thinking right now. Again, that's subject to change, but that looks like the scenario based on the water vapor imagery. And then, of course, the other option is this trough of low pressure is so strong it eventually ends up pulling Nate north, and it doesn't turn back to the west and just pulls it right into the east, up the eastern seaboard. That is a possibility as well. And then, of course, we have Maria out here, and again, very disorganized. We have a big old trough out here with westerly wind shear. I don't really think this is going to develop very much at all for the next several days. Moving too fast, too much wind shear out there. It might find a more favorable environment in this area here, but again, there's Katia getting out of the way, going to move off to the northeast, and that's going to leave a trough out here, and that's what the thinking on the models is. Maria's going to find the trough and move to the north. The question is, how close is it going to get to Florida? Is it going to turn before it gets there, or the model's going to shift any further west? We're going to watch it, or the model's going to shift off to the right. That's another possibility. So all this to watch. I'll be back with another update tomorrow on both of these systems. That's it for now. Thank you again for visiting Hurricane City.